All right. Good afternoon, Golden Flashes. Happy Wednesday. Appreciate all 384, 393 of you that are on the call right now. And it's always my pleasure, now more than 400, to interact with you. So for today's Talking with Todd, I want to talk about three things and then leave plenty of time for question and answer. So I want to talk to you about what we colloquially refer to as our capital bill. This is money that we get every other year from the state of Ohio for renovation projects. I want to talk about that. Then I want to just talk a bit more about our core values, and in particular, how do we square freedom of speech and then the other core value of kindness and respect. I want to say a few words about the eclipse and then open it up to question and answer. So we're now over 500 people, and I appreciate all of you taking time out to interact with me today. Okay, what we call the capital bill. So in Ohio, every other year, the legislature typically delivers a pot of money to public universities in Ohio for them to spend on renovation and deferred maintenance. So it's usually not money for new buildings. It usually is money for fixing up infrastructure. This is called the capital bill. And so, for example, in our capital bill this year, Kent State is seeking funds to replace the elevators in the library because our library is now 50 years old, as are the elevators, and we have trouble keeping those operational. Okay, so I want to just say, first of all, that I really appreciate in Ohio the state legislature funding these every other year capital bills. When I interviewed for the provost job almost 12, well, a little over 12 years ago, one of the things that really impressed me about Kent State was how well maintained the buildings are. I was coming from two big state universities, University of Tennessee and the University of Massachusetts, that struggled to keep up with deferred maintenance, that struggled to fix their buildings. And when I got here, I was very impressed, and that's because the state provides this funding. So I'm thankful for this funding. And I'm mentioning capital funding right now because we're in the season of determining how much we would get. And then I want to walk you through some changes in the process for obtaining those funds. So here's how funding is determined. 15 years or so ago, so 3 or 4 years before I got here, then Governor Kasich, he basically turned awarding capital funding over to the public universities through our voluntary association that's known as the IUC, the Inter-University Council. So the state, the legislature, the governor, would determine the overall pot of money for the 14 public universities to spend on renovation projects. And then 3 or 4 years before I got here, Governor Kasich said, look, you presidents figure it out. You come up with a methodology to determine how much each school should get. And as long as all 14 presidents agree, then the funds are approved. And that's the process we've been in the 12 years I've been at Kent State. And the methodology that the public universities developed internally to distribute this money, it was based on enrollment, it was based on square footage of buildings on a campus, it was based on the percentage of your square footage that's in really high-priced programs like engineering that have lots of different HVAC and other needs, high-cost fields, etc. So that's the way it's worked. All right, this year, the state legislature has indicated $300 million in this overall pot of money for the 14 public universities to divide and share. And according to the existing Inter-University Council methodology, Kent State writ large should get $29 million this year. This is for HVAC upgrades. This is for infrastructure. Our request this year is for infrastructure in Whitehall, HVAC, it's for elevators in the library, it's for smaller projects on our regional campuses. Here's the change this year. In the past, Governor Kasich and then Governor DeWine said, you guys, here's how much money you get. You figure out which each school gets, and we're good to go. This year, the chair of the State Senate Higher Education Committee decided that each public university president should testify in front of the Higher Education Committee and present the school's capital bill request and, in essence, to defend that request to the Higher Education Committee of the Senate. And in addition, to present what in essence is a budget summary of the university writ large. So like, what has the university been spending its money on for the past 5 years? What's its budget right now? What do you think your budget's going to look like in the future? And we accomplished that by sending, I think it was 78 pages of data to the state Senate. And then also in this required testimony was dividing out and speaking specifically to what we spend at our universities on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in conclusion on this particular topic, Capitol bill, I testified before the state Senate Higher Education Committee last week. And I think LaShonda is going to drop into the chat the link to that testimony. So if you haven't seen it, you click on the link, you'll see me talking for about 30 minutes. And then for a little over 30 minutes, I answer questions from state senators. And by the way, we're now up to 783 people, and I welcome all of you and thanks for being on here. So again, 29 million is the amount that we think we will receive. That's the IUC formula. And our projects include replacing the elevators in the library, which break down repeatedly and make it harder for us to really use meaningfully the upper floors of our library, and ongoing, pretty significant heating and ventilation and air conditioning work, other infrastructure work in Whitehall. That's a building, that's approaching 60 years and certainly needs to be renovated along those lines. Okay. So if you heard about me testifying in front of the state Senate last week, I was testifying over or about our capital bill request. Okay, switch gears here. And again, I want to leave plenty of time for question and answer. Talk about core values, talk about the speaker that was on campus last night, say a few things about that. So first of all, kudos to everyone who kept our campus safe during last night's talk by Kyle Rittenhouse. We just had outstanding planning. I'll get more into that in a minute, by our Kent State University Police Department and state partners, particularly with the State Highway Patrol. So kudos to them. Kudos in particular to Dean Tognelia and Chris Jenkins for that. I want to thank our Division of Student Life, in particular our Senior VP for Student Life, Ebony Pringle, and Dean Talia Drummer, and all of the people in that unit that worked a lot over the last few days and weeks. I also know that we had a few faculty marshals at the event last night, so that's a proud tradition at Kent State. It's a very noble and powerful tradition at Kent State. So please accept my thanks, you faculty marshals that were there last night. I was so happy to hear that. But mostly, and most importantly, I just want to thank our students, because we always talk about, we have two core values: core value of kindness and respect, and the core value of freedom of speech. And, those can be in conflict, right? You can have conflict between those two values, but our students demonstrated both commitments to both. And I really want to thank you for adopting and holding dear those core values that we have at Kent State. Really much appreciated. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about safety, because this topic of safety came up both in an afternoon press conference by students opposed to the appearance of Kyle Rittenhouse, but then the speaker himself referred to safety. And so I thought, well, let's talk about safety and what that means at Kent State and what we do. So in terms of physical safety, that's more straightforward. Again, kudos to our Kent State University Police Department. I can't get into details, but just bear in mind that there were a lot of behind the scenes actors and work going on over the past weeks and days. A lot of environmental scanning to determine who might be coming to this event, when and where. So a lot of preparatory work to keep people physically safe at Kent State University. And we did that last night, and our KSU Police Department and others help us do that day in and day out. So that's the physical safety side of things. When these events happen and people speak, I often hear, particularly our students, discuss emotional and psychological safety. And so I will often hear and will be moved by expressions from students that say that we don't feel safe here. The physical safety part, I think, is separate, really, from not feeling safe emotionally or psychologically or in a communal sense. And that's more complicated, right? Physical safety is one thing. Do you feel safe as a human being, as an individual? That's something different. It's far more complicated, right? Because individual senses of safety are, well, I mean, they're individual. If we have 36,000 students and roughly 3,000 employees, that's 39,000 people. Probably each of those 39,000 people have a different definition of what constitutes safety in their own mind. But it's no less important than the physical safety. So here I just want to point out again to the key role played by our Division of Student Life. They meet with our students. We have various groups that meet, affinity groups that can provide a sense of community and a sense of safety in that sense. So, in short, we're a small city. And particularly the Kent campus, in terms of its enrollment, the number of people that live on campus, we're a city. We're 5 times bigger than the town I grew up in. So we take all of these things seriously. We take physical safety seriously. And even when our members of our community have very different ideas about what constitutes safety, we address those through the work of our student life and our Division of Student Life. So I'm going to finish that part of my remarks by just thanking one more time our students. You modeled freedom of speech, which is A, entirely appropriate, and B, entirely keeping with the history of Kent State. And then we also honored our commitment to free speech. So much appreciated. Okay, before I turn things over to Q&A, I just want to say a few words about last week's eclipse, which I found to be, and I wasn't really prepared for this, unexpectedly emotional and moving. I'm just talking about my own experience. I mean, it was such a glorious day. You don't always expect it to be sunny and warm in Northeast Ohio in mid-April, and it had not been sunny and it had not been warm in the days leading up to the eclipse. And then the day the eclipse dawns and it's sunny, and we saw this amazing event. And it was so beautiful. I was moved. I was moved to tears when the full eclipse happened. I looked around. There were thousands of people on the Kent campus, everybody in just this spirit of community and harmony. And it was such a beautiful moment. And so let me say that I was wrong and everybody else was right. Over the last weeks, we've been deciding how much to plan for this. And I thought people were exaggerating how much planning we should do. And I was like, why are we planning? It's going to be raining sideways and 38 degrees and nobody's going to show up. And then I got a request from the provost through Dana Lawless-Andrick and our town officials to not have classes on that day. And I didn't think that was a reasonable request. but we did it, and it was absolutely the right thing to do. So what a beautiful event. What a beautiful day. I hope all of you got a chance to participate and had a chance to witness what I witnessed. And gee, what a magical event. Okay, so we've got the remainder of our time here for question and answers. And gosh, we're at 860 participants, so thank you for doing that. The first question, I think I've covered what's covered by Kent's request for funds this time. Library elevators, Whitehall, infrastructure and HVAC. There's some other projects. There's a project for the main entry into our Burton building and our Geauga campus and those sorts of things. Okay, next question. During your presentation before the Ohio Senate Workforce and Higher Education Committee, you mentioned the 3 buildings on campus will be taken down rather than, hold on while I click here, rather than upkeeping them. Can you share what buildings will be taken down and what the timeline is for these projects? Well, we won't be able to do any of that demolition until we get extra funds, and that's not covered in the capital request. But the instructions for this year's testimony said if you had money for demolition, what would you take down? And it's principally the current building that's now home to the Ambassador Crawford College of Business and Entrepreneurship. So our plan is to, not a plan, we are going to move into the new building, Crawford Hall, this summer. And then we would like to take down that building that's been around since the 70s, I would think. And it's not a good building. And it'll cost us way more than we want to spend just to keep a roof on it and keep the water out and to keep the pipes from freezing in the winter. So that's the principal building that we want to bring down. I think at some point we have one remaining largely unrenovated residence hall, which is Verter Hall. So we either have to decide whether to spend millions of dollars to renovate it or take it down. And then there's a couple of small buildings that are only lightly occupied. And that would be what would be included in that demolition, principally the current business building. Okay, during the presentation before the Ohio Senate Workforce and Higher Education Committee, you stated that 76% of our budget goes to salaries, benefits, and scholarships. Can you please break this down? What percentage goes to wages and benefits and what percentage goes to scholarships? Well, a good president could do that, but I don't have my notes with me right now, and so I cannot break that down. But just as a reminder, and let me read, there's another part of this question. Could you elaborate on the term benefits? Does this include things like health insurance as well as benefits such as housing and living stipends? I'm not sure about housing and living stipends because I'm not sure what that means, but it definitely includes health insurance. It includes the benefit you get as a full-time employee for yourself or for your family to attend Kent State and have the tuition remission. That's one of the benefits. It definitely covers that. And if somebody on our vice presidential team wants to text me the breakdown of salaries, benefits, and scholarships, I'd love to see that. So I'll put my phone right here in case that happens. I will say that our scholarship budget has grown from roughly 20 million a year to roughly 50 million a year in about the last 12 years or so. It's a ferociously competitive market out there, and we use those scholarship funds to attract people to come to Kent State, but it's a really tough environment for that. So let me click my refresh here because I'm not seeing the questions. Oh, here we go. Good. I was able to watch a recording of your testimony to the Senate Higher Ed Committee. I was also able to watch portions of the other president's testimonies. With all that in mind, I just wanted to share a note of gratitude for your advocacy for KSU and your Incredibly deft navigation of potentially tricky opportunity. I felt a sense of pride while watching your remarks and responses to their questions. Again, thank you. Well, that's so kind. These are anonymous. I don't know who's submitting that. Two things. Well, three things. First, thank you. It's very kind of you to say that, and it was my honor to be there. Secondly, I was incredibly well prepared for that testimony. We worked for months, literally, with our university communications team, and particularly with Stephen Ward and Rebecca Murphy. Then we worked with our government relations folks, Brady Oxender, and then Brady reports to Nick Gattosi. And man, I was so well prepared for that testimony. I was so well prepared for the questions, but I have to say it's really all a blur. And whatever positive value I added as president was because of those people. And I just got a text from our enrollment management folks saying that our scholarships grew from 24 million to 74 million this past year. So we've grown by over 50 million in 15 years. And then I'll probably get the breakdown before I finish here. Okay, this is a great question. What is a faculty marshal? So you'll remember at the start of today, I mentioned that we had faculty marshals at the event last night. So the faculty marshals are there to help. They're not there as peacemakers, but they're certainly there to help clear up any confusions. They're there as observers. So if something happens, they would be a good source of observations. They're there to help direct people, to give directions. And it reaches back into the 1960s. And then on May 4th, famously on May 4th, 1970, it was our faculty marshals, and particularly Glenn Frank, that played a pivotal role after the shootings themselves to prevent further shootings. If you've not seen the video, I think it's 13-minute video in the May 4 Visitor Center, just go over there and look at it. And you'll see the role that faculty marshals played in preventing students from rushing the guard, which would have been a massacre. And it's really one of the powerful traditions of Kent State. So thank you, faculty marshals, and that's what a faculty marshal is. From your Columbus presentation, what points about Kent State do you hope stuck with the legislators? Well, a couple of things. First of all, it is often the case that our elected officials do not know that we are a multi-campus system. I regularly interact with elected officials who don't know that we have regional campuses. They don't know that we occupy an area the size of Connecticut. They don't know that we have a College of Podiatric Medicine. So I would say one of the things that I hope stuck in my presentation was a reminder of who we are, how many campuses we are, and what's our impact in terms of graduating 10,000 students a year, right? So if you add up all the graduates of our associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degree, education specialist degrees, doctorates, that's 10,000 a year. And if you think of the undergraduate population at Case Western is right at 10,000, that's why I always say we graduate at Case Western every year. That's just a reminder that we're a really big university that does big things in Northeast Ohio. So I hope that stuck. And then I think a second thing that I hope stuck, and I'll do two more. Another thing that I hope stuck was that just what an anchor institution we are in the communities our regional campuses occupy. So if you think about East Liverpool, we're the second largest employer in the city. And so if you think that it's the role of government, and you think it's the role of higher education to serve its community, our being present in each of those communities is a public service. It adds value. We know from our own experience that students that aren't close to one of those campuses are unlikely to go to college. So I would like for the senators to realize that our multi-campus system is absolutely vital to who we are in our DNA. That's a second thing. And then a third thing, and let me see how I put this delicately. A third thing that I hope stuck with the legislators is many of them I've discovered have a sort of stereotype about Kent State that is informed entirely by May 4th, 1970. And so, and that's an important part of who we are. I've just started the whole talk today about core values. And so I'm not denying that May 4th, 1970 is a major part of who we are, but it's not the only thing, right? I mean, so I think they're surprised to learn that we have the state's largest flight training program with our own airport and some 36 airplanes. I think they're surprised to hear that, and that so many commercial pilots in the United States are Kent State graduates. And so that I said to the senators, you know, if you fly commercially, you likely have flown on a commercial flight that had Kent State as the pilot. So I think the third thing is just how much we engage in workforce development. I mentioned flight training, our architecture. The last time I looked, our architecture program was 13th in the nation in the number of its graduates that are hired in architectural firms. So I hope that stuck as well. And I think Mark has now texted me the breakdown of salaries, benefits, and scholarships. So thank you, Mark Politico, and all hail technology. So salaries are 47% of our budget at Kent State University. Benefits are 17% of our budget at Kent State University. And scholarships are 11% of our budget. I'll just repeat those. Salaries are 47%, benefits are 17%, and scholarships are 11% of our budget. Thanks, Mark, and thanks for the person that asked that question. Okay, this is a good question. I don't know is the answer. I'll just warn you. But I also want to give kudos. Here's the question. How much do you think the delays in FAFSA and financial aid will affect enrollment this coming year? Is this a future budget concern? If you're not familiar with this, the FAFSA is the federal, I don't know what the hell it stands for. It's the federal form that you fill out if you want to be eligible for financial aid at an institution of higher education. And there was a reworking by the federal government of the FAFSA form, and there was a reworking of the FAFSA formulas, and that's been delayed. And so we're not yet able to tell our current students and prospective students exactly what their financial aid package will be next year. Now, all thanks to our enrollment management folks and to our financial aid folks within enrollment management, because they have been contacting individual students. We've moved back our deadline for entering freshmen to declare their intent to enroll here and to accept our financial aid offer. So we're moving behind the scenes to ameliorate the impact of the FAFSA. I think in the end, it won't be a major impact on enrollment. It is a major impact on our ability to predict numbers right now, but I think because of the good work I just mentioned, we're going to get through this. Okay. Sorry, but I have to click back and forth to get an updated version of Q&A. Okay. During your presentation last week, Senator Serino asked you about the university's debt, which you said was north of 300 million. Additionally, you and Dr. Politico stated about half of that would fall off in the next few years. Could you share how that might impact the amount of money the university might need to find so we can meet the reductions discussed during last month's talking with Todd? Yeah, I can address that. We've already baked that into all of our planning. So in essence, we would have to be cutting more if we didn't already have baked in reductions in the amount of debt service that we have to pay each year going forward. That's a really great question. And so the direct answer is yes, we've already included that in our calculations. Okay, we would love to see wellness as a top priority on campus for employees. How can we get support from you and supervisors to participate in daily wellness activities? with workload being at an all-time high right now, I'm worried health and wellness is not a priority. Yeah, yeah, we do have to take care of ourselves. I'm pretty, I'll just speak to myself. I'm pretty physically active, but boy, these last few weeks, I mean, I seem to be living on a diet of miniature chocolates and Fritos, which is probably not on the healthy list of wellness recommendations. So yes, we definitely want people to take care of themselves. And I think in terms of encouraging people to participate in those activities, well, let's just always look for opportunities to take those activities to where people are so that, maybe instead of having to go from one side of campus to another and race back during a lunch hour, we can do it where people are. Okay, touching on the topic of budgets, are there any plans to demolish or update any other buildings such as Michael Schwartz building in the near or far future? Yeah, I know we always talk about Michael Schwartz. It's not always the most occupied building. I mean, it has great people in it, but we don't have any immediate plans to tear down Michael Schwartz. It's across the street. It sometimes has more occupants in it, and sometimes it has fewer occupants in it. So this is a good question because it's not on our plans right now. But I would say if you told me what's the fourth one on our plans, it might indeed be Michael Schwartz. But before we do that, we got to put a whole lot of other things into process, right? We got to identify space. We got to identify appropriate space. We need to talk to the employees. We need to get their advice. We need to get their reactions. So short answer, yeah, I could see how that would be on the list. Longer answer is we don't have any immediate plans for that. Quick question. How does the university plan to stay competitive with attracting and retaining top talent amidst the multi-year budget cuts? Well, okay, a couple of things. One of these will sound flippant and cynical. So I'm going to lead with the flippant and cynical and then try to be more meaningful. I mean, as bad as things are at Kent State, they're worse around us. So what's one plan is to not be in as bad a shape as others. And well, I see a student being taken off in a stretcher, so I hope they're okay, Mark. Will you check into that? Because they just went under my window. So let's make sure that person's okay. So, we still are, we still have great benefits. We still are thinking about what we can do even in budget cuts. So as I mentioned to Faculty Senate, when we look at our 5-year budget plan, we include raises in each of those years. So even while we're cutting budgets, we know it's important to take care of our employees. That's why we have budgeted in raises. So we've done that in our planning, and it's tough times. I was talking to an individual who's in financial planning and works with lots of area universities, and a lot of us are really in the same scenario. So it might not be that what I'm trying to say here is we're not singular in our challenges to the point where people are easily going to find better scenarios. That's not the only answer, but it's yes. Okay, the student is okay. Good. Glad to read that. Thanks, Mark. Okay, let me click on here to get the updated questions. We have a new team system in place. Oh, if you fear that our government officials who make these important decisions do not know that our regional campuses are so important to Kent State's success, how do we change that? It scares me that if they don't know what the regional campuses do, they will just decide to close them. What can be done to inform them all of the wonderful things the Kent campus and regional campuses do? Okay, yeah, great question. Several observations. One is, kudos to Nick Gattosi from Government Relation and Brady Oxender, because they are always working to explain our regional campuses and the impact of our regional campuses to elected officials. Part of the challenge in Columbus is with term limits. So with term limits, you are always dealing with a notable percentage of recently elected officials who just don't have the experience set that someone who had been in office for 3 or 4 terms had built up. So part of our challenge is just that you're always getting new people in the state legislature, and they just don't know these things. So one of the ways that we address that is through the work of government relations. Our regional deans participate in a regional campus day on in the state capitol, and they're really good about spreading the work that they do. And then we have each of our regional campuses has a board of advisors, and I think we're gonna step up our work with our boards of advisors to really carry that good message to the elected officials. So I appreciate that question. I hope that answered it. Okay, I see that Cleveland State is set to offer buyouts to faculty and staff. Do you see the same on the horizon for Kent State University? It's something that we've done in the past on multiple occasions. It's always part of what we are looking into. We just have to figure out how to do it and how to be able to afford the one-time costs. So I don't have any announcement right now of any offer or any program to do that, but as we keep cutting, that's certainly one option we're just going to have to keep in mind as we make our way through the next 3 to 4 fiscal years. Okay, this is a good question. What gives you hope in the face of budget deficits, higher ed's enrollment cliff, what feels like political tensions with the Ohio legislature and possibly other dire concerns? Yeah, what gives me hope? I look out my window, I see these students, I go to the eclipse and I interact with everybody in our community. That gives me hope. Yesterday, Vice President Amwaba Gooden and myself participated in a meeting with our staff council, and we interacted with them. I interacted with them for an hour. Those are great employees with a real fierce dedication to Kent State. That gives me hope. What gives me hope is when I do these what's the big idea research videos, and I find out this amazing work being done by Kent State researchers, much of it which has real world impact. So the current what's the big idea video is on our researchers in the College of Public Health who are using artificial intelligence to help better chart and predict where overdoses are likely to happen in 3 Ohio counties to help local public health officials address overdoses and develop preventative measures. So, the answer, it's all of you, all 831 of you on this call. That's why I have hope in the face of all these issues. Question, will the university be addressing a telework policy rather than leaving it up to divisions? Well, well, first of all, we don't leave it up to divisions. We have a telework policy in place, and the shorthand version is you can do telework, but not more than 20% of your employees can have some form of teleworking. But we're always looking to make that better. We're always looking at best practices at other universities. We're always looking at ways to implement that, but to maintain really a great campus, a really great system of campuses, and really great work. And I know that if we do alter, tweak our telework policies, we have to do so in part to save on how much we spend on space. And so if we're going to have telework, we need to start doubling up in offices and the like so that we can reduce further the number of buildings and our infrastructure costs. Okay, question. Do you think that you and other presidents were able to leave a more positive image of our work than the senators may have had to the previous to the hearing? Well, I don't know. Honestly, the whole thing is a blur to me. And I think if I did well, it was because I was well prepared. But I feel like I'm the worst person in the world to comment on the impression that the senators left that meeting with. I hope it was positive. I'll just say this. When I interact with the other presidents of the 14 public universities in Ohio, I'm just always impressed by them. I'm impressed by their dedication, and I'm impressed by their creativity, and I'm hopeful that the senators will see that in these testimonies. Wow, I love this next comment. Start a walking with Todd. Well, let's think about that. That is a really great idea. At the urging of Diana Bolden here in the president's office, I periodically climb from the second floor to the 12th floor of the library. I climb steps. I did so yesterday. I thought I was going to pass out. So if you're in the library and you want to stick your head into the stairwell, you may have an impromptu talking with Todd, but that is a really great idea. So I know our university communications and marketing folks are on the line, and that's a really great idea. Thank you for submitting that. Okay. With the occupied positions that have been eliminated in recent weeks, can you speak to the palpable fear among the staff who are far along in their public employment careers and worry about being eliminated and the impact to the goal of their OPERS retirement after decades of service to Kent? Yeah, I want to speak to that. Appreciate the question. It's an important question. That's part of being the best employer we can be. If you talk to some national business consultants who advise higher education on how to deal with the pressures that we're all under right now as public universities in the North and Northeast, oftentimes they will say, look, just rip the Band-Aid off, eliminate entire units, and fire everybody in the units. And we really, really, really don't want to do that. We don't think that reflects who Kent State is. So we certainly, as I have said in the past, we certainly want to reduce the size of our workforce, but we want to do so by not replacing people who leave voluntarily. You'll remember in a previous Talking with Todd, I referred to that as attrition. So we definitely would prefer that route. And as we do our financial planning, we have not baked into the planning a mass elimination of jobs. Look, as I said, I think I said, but it's all a blur. As I think I said in the state Senate testimony, we're mindful of the fact that our employees chose us, and when they chose us a year ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, they may have turned down another job opportunity. And so here they put their faith in us and have taken up roots in Northeast Ohio. Maybe they've purchased a home, they pay taxes, they send their kids to school, they're volunteers, they're really enmesh themselves and become the fabric of the community. Why would we want to tear that apart? We don't want to tear that apart. So I think I know that it is incumbent upon me and our vice presidents and in consultation with our great shared governance workers, staff, faculty, to come up with ways to balance our budget, because we just have to do that. But how are we going to do that and not do wholesale job eliminations of the kind that we see in other universities, which that's just not who we are as Kent State. That's kind of the living embodiment of not being a caring institution. So appreciate that comment, and let me refresh the questions. Somebody says, I'll take steps with you. That would be fun. And I just got a text saying, ask who had Walking with Todd idea, please, and thank them for joining us. So yeah, I will make a note of who asked that, or may have been anonymous actually. So I don't know who asked that, but thank you for whoever asked that question. Okay. Are there plans to do more entrepreneurial activities beyond traditional education to generate revenue? Yes. Yes, there are. And, I can think of, for example, global education. So we have our American Academy. That's bringing us 100 students a year that 5 years ago we would not have had at Kent State University. We're doing similar work in Rwanda. So a lot of good work in the international area to generate increased revenues. We're starting to really explore and implement meaningful shared services, say in information technology and in other areas with other regional universities, so that we can share those expenses and maybe cut down on cost increases. So there's revenue generation, that's important, and it's then just as important to avoid cost increases. So as we try to work more and more with other universities in the region. One of the challenges to that cooperation with other schools is you, meaning me, I, and others will work with the leaders of other institutions, and they'll be fully on board, and then they retire or they depart, and then the new person isn't on board. So then it's like you got to start the whole process over again. So it's a little more complicated than I would have thought. And well, we'll always look for those opportunities. Okay, so I think we are now at the end of our time, and I want to thank all 811 of you that are on the Teams call. And so I'm gonna sign off now and wish you a wonderful day. I hope you experienced the eclipse, and I hope you experienced it in the just emotionally powerful way I did. Thank you all for what you do. I mean that sincerely. We're approaching May 4th, so would encourage you to engage in the commemorations of May 4th. I think it drives so much of what we do. It's really at the heart of our dual commitment to freedom of speech and kindness and respect. So please join me in participating in those events as well. So really a pleasure to speak with all of you, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.